Is another reading of Mehera-Meher, Volume 2, page 412. Uh, Chapter is called Five on the Hill. We're continuing with it. So, besides packing and selling off their belongings, those going with Baba were given a list of certain things to take. For instance, sturdy clothing, warm enough for winter, had to be stitched. Ready made clothing was unavailable in India then, so everything was made to order. Goher remembered most of the sewing was overseen by Erich's sister, Meru, who was living in Kushru quarters. She called the tailor and had it stitched. We sent our sizes and the patterns, and Meru got it done. We used whatever material we had on hand. We also had to have a pair of strong, sturdy sandals made that we could walk in, just one pair. Baba told us to order these things. Everything passed through Baba's hands. Kaka went and gave the order. None of us ever went into the bazaar in those days. Later, it was decided to take two pairs of sandals each. Photo identity cards were required for traveling in India then, and each of the four New Life women, and Baba too, was issued one on 5 October. And the sidebar says, on the identity card is written, profession, spiritual aspirant. On Baba's is profession, saint. Kitty and Rano stayed at Meherzad until 15 October. On that day, they were sent to Mehrabad, from where they left by car with Khorshid, Sunamasi, and Minu Karas for Pune, where they took a train to Bombay. Baba came from Meherzad to see them off. That was even more difficult, Rano stated. Saying goodbye to Baba and having him wave us off. We kept looking back, looking and looking. When are we going to see Baba again? Khorshid had been so upset at not being included in those going with Baba that she had become physically ill. She ran a fever for several days, and Kitty was now nursing her. Leaving Mehrabad for the last time was heart-wrenching. Khorshid was sobbing. Mara was going with Baba, so she was happy, Khorshid said. But for me, separation was terrible. To have been all the time with Baba and then not. For a few months, it was awful. The sudden separation was very hard, and then to stay in someone else's house. Sidebar says, on 7 October 1949, Adi Sr. and Sarosh were sent to Nasik to explain about the new life to Daulat Mai and Frani. Baba had told Khorshid repeatedly, I will send you to Mayorji's, but don't step out of the house. Don't leave. Even if your throat is being slit, swallow whatever bitter medicine you are given, but don't leave. Merji's wife was not a Baba lover, and because she did not like Khorshid and Sunamasi staying in her home, they faced her constant abuse and insults, sometimes subtly expressed, but usually not. Nevertheless, this was the trial that Baba had given them for the new life, and they did not leave. Mara said, we didn't outwardly think that we would never see Khorshid again or Mehrabad. We never gave it a thought that way, but somehow inwardly we felt Baba was not so serious about it. Some people, like Kaku, did take it seriously. Her only son, Vishnu, was with Baba. She got a shock when Baba said he was never going to return. She too almost fell ill. She was a bit of the nervous type. Indeed, Kakubai died a year and a half later while Baba and Vishnu were still away. Mani remembered. Kaku was very close to us, especially to Mera and myself. She saw Baba leaving, the best, the biggest, the everything in her life, plus her son, Vishnu, plus Mera, plus Mani. She was broken-hearted. She died before we came back. The shock was great for others, too. They felt this was the end, but they carried on, and Baba put everything right, as he always does. Sidebar says that's from Tales, page 174. Goher said that she never thought about whether they would ever be returning. She simply accepted what Baba said. Her sister Katie, who had lived in the ashram for 10 years, stated that bidding goodbye to Baba was one of the most difficult things she had ever done in her life. Mansari recalled, the last time we saw Baba before he left for the new life, we were weeping, but trying to control ourselves. I was a crier and I was a giggler, both. Baba told her, I will go anywhere, but I am always here at Mehrabad. Remember, he repeated, I am always here. You are lucky to be staying here. And here's a picture of Mara's identity card from 1949, courtesy of Sheila Krinsky, Merazad Collection. Profession, here's a spiritual aspirant. Year of birth 1907. Height 5'3". And here's Goher on the right. I'm not sure who's that on the left. Is it Mani? I guess so, maybe. Oh, Meru. That's Meru. Picture of Baba and Mera. Baba's all wrapped up. That's in Mandla, 29 December 1938, courtesy of Hetty Martins. Chapter 88, Birth of the New Life. During September and October 1949, Mera Baba continued to wind up affairs of the old life in preparation for the birth of the new life, which was scheduled to begin on 16 October. Until now, for more than 25 years, Baba had maintained a traditional Indian ashram based on the classic master-disciple bond. Now, that was being torn down and done away with. He was disposing of all his physical properties, and he intended to break off from most of his old disciples. Moreover, the hierarchical system would be gone in favor of a more democratic relationship, in which, he said, he would become a quote unquote companion to the Mandali, though they would still have to obey his orders implicitly. And finally, Baba intended to do away with all rites, rituals, and religious ceremonies, the mainstay of Orthodox religions. Most of the women Mandali sharing in the new life would do so apart from Baba, but the situation was reversed with the men. Most of them would accompany Baba and be under his direct supervision. A circular of conditions was prepared, spelling out in exhaustive detail Baba's conditions and orders for those men who wished to go with him. Baba did, however, tell the women about the conditions and explain their subsequent adjustments, as he commented later on. Quote, the four ladies had nothing to do with conditions. I decide everything for them. But since they are to be with us to the end, I kept on explaining the conditions to them. The ladies will have no conditions, but will have orders from me. End quote. The conditions for the men included not expecting to receive any material or spiritual benefit, any special care for physical infirmities, any humoring of weaknesses, or any miraculous intervention to protect or save them from disaster. The companions would have few amenities for their comfort and have to go with Baba everywhere, including by foot. Baba would live among them as a brother or friend, but they must still obey him as the master. Also, they could not touch women, give or accept money, discuss politics, express anger, visit anywhere, or eat or drink anything without Baba's permission. Furthermore, could not tell lies or accept homage from anybody, from anyone. They also had to accept individual responsibility before God for any consequences that might follow. A torrential thunderstorm drenched the Ahmednagar area the night of 15 October, and it was still raining when the men and women companions woke at 2 a.m. to begin their new life. From now on, mention of the word Mandali was prohibited. All, including Baba, were to be on the same level. Originally, the men were to have walked from Meherabad to the railway station crossing, but because of the rain, they were now permitted to ride there in a bus, arranged by Sarosh. They took baths first, dressed, drank tea, and arrived at the railway crossing by 4:15 a.m. Erich remembered. The companions who were with Baba were fully convinced that they were not going to return. They were convinced of this by Baba's statements, and once they were convinced, the world did not exist because they left behind their possessions, families, wives, children, brothers, sisters, mothers, aged relatives, everybody. They didn't care for anything. They dared undergo anything. On a month's notice, just 1 month, they turned their backs on everything and followed Baba. If they were able to do this, why should they care for anything else in the world? They were determined to go through this new life with Baba. At Merazad, the four women washed their faces, had tea and breakfast, and did some last-minute packing. Baba took a bath and made up a bundle of clothes that he wished to take. Everyone was rushing about, running upstairs and down to bring Baba's things from his room. Baba, too, was walking back and forth from the men's side and required their attention. So before we even started the new life, Mara said, we were already dead tired. It was still dark outside, but the electric generator was turned on so they had light. Even though Baba planned to leave Merazad forever, he had ordered electric fittings done when the new house was built, remarking, "This is due to my old habit of maintaining the old order of things right up to the moment I actually start anything new." Thus, on the night of 12 October, the generator had been started and Merazad had electricity. But Baba had complained all night about the irritating loud noise. So the next day it was switched off. Now, when the women had need of it, it was turned on again. Some of their clothes were still damp, and Meru hurriedly ran an iron over them. Erich drove the car near the house, and Baba sat in the front seat next to Kakabaria. Half an hour passed. What was the delay? Mani, or Meru, came and whispered something in Baba's ear. Baba explained that Mara was feeling shy to sit in the car without the usual curtain separating the front and back seat. She had never done so before when there were men in the car. Baba told Erich to put up the curtain. Mera, Mani, and Meru came and sat in the car, but where was Goher? Erich honked the horn. Goher shouted that Baba's bedroom door had swelled in the rainy season and she couldn't close it. Erich went upstairs, kicked it shut, and locked it. How did the four women feel to be setting off on the new life? Goher's reaction was true for all of them. I was a little sad to leave, but if we had been going away without Baba, it would have been so difficult for us, like all the others. For us, because Baba was to be with us, we didn't mind leaving Merazad. Despite the hectic rush and nostalgia over leaving their home, the mood was a happy one as the women left in the Buick with Baba, Erich, and Kaka at 3:30 a.m. to join the men at the railway station. Each carried a small satchel containing toiletries, a hairbrush, a small towel, a cup and saucer, an aluminum plate, and so on. Everything was light. No crockery was taken, as that would have been too heavy to carry. It was still drizzling a little when they left, and even when they got to the station, where the men were standing around with gunny sacks on their heads to keep off the rain. But when they started and drove across the railway line, the rain stopped. Baba said that they must get down from the car now and walk. Previously, Baba had said, we leave Mehrabad early in the morning of the 16th, and my men companions should walk 1 furlong, that's 220 yards, ahead of me and the four women companions. The men should laugh, talk, and be cheerful without jeopardizing the conditions. But now, Baba instructed the men companions to keep a distance of 1 furlong behind the women. He also asked them to keep silent for a minute before starting, and then touch the road and their foreheads in a gesture of humility and reverence. Baba himself was the first to do so. Then, raising his hands, Baba asked the companions to utter this prayer. O God, make a success of this new life and turn it into eternal bliss for all. The sidebar says that's from Lord Mayor Online, page 2784. The women left their sacks in the car and walked for a short while with Baba. The luggage truck with Kaka, Pendu, and Nilu followed, and after it walked the men companions. The sidebar here says Mehera's and Baba's satchels were always kept separately from the others during the new life. It was damp and cool, and then it started to rain again, softly. But Baba said, no one must get wet and catch a cold. So the women happily got back into the car with Baba, and Padre drove on. It seemed that it was necessary to at least start the new life by walking with Baba for just these few minutes. Unbeknownst to the other three women companions, Goher kept a diary for the first 3 days of their new life journey. So this is from Goher's diary. And so on Sunday the 16th, October 1949, we started on our new phase of life with our beloved Master Baba. On the day of our departure at Pimplegaon, Baba woke us up at 2 a.m. and the hustle bustle of our last packing started. It was a dark night, and a drizzle had continued throughout the night. It was drizzling when we woke up. Baba's first thought was for the Mandalay, who might get wet. Pimplegaon was my heavenly abode. The garden was at its height of beauty when we left it. The flowers in their multifarious colors were in profusion. The bougainvillea had also started flowering. Each rose bush had 5 to 6 roses blossoming on it. The dahlias were beautiful, and even Mani's surprise garden patch looked a picture with its variety of flowers and colors. The pomegranate tree branches had arched low with the weight of its fruit. Tiny, 3 feet high, custard apple trees bore large, sweet fruit. The back kitchen garden and orchard near the well had all sorts of vegetables growing in it. Toby, Mani's turtle friend, and the other turtle, which Kaka found in the field, both seemed happy in the well. The sidebar says, Mara did not dislike turtles, but she did remark, turtles are not my kind of pet. The surrounding hills lent a picturesque view. They looked green and peaceful after the rains. Baba's Hill at the back, with its seclusion cabin, added a more spiritual atmosphere. This beautiful picture will forever remain in my memory still. I am happy wherever I am with Baba. And Goher's diary continues. We were all excited and full of enterprise to start on our new life with Baba. At 4:15 a.m., Baba, we 4 women, Erich, and Kaka left Pimplegaon by car. It was raining when our car stopped at the railway crossing near Nagar station. The Mandalay were already waiting there. It was still raining then. Although Baba had said repeatedly that he would be very severe and all had to bear the hardships of nature, he could not bear to see them struggle in the rain with the burden of their heavy sacks and the muddy road on the first day of their journey. As always, very considerate, Baba asked Erich to have the companions' sacks put in the luggage truck and each to walk with a gonpat, that's a gunny sack, on his head. Goher's diary continues. Padre then drove our car. We crossed the railway line and then it stopped raining and we got out of the car and started walking. Baba and we four women in front and the Mondali a few furlongs behind. It was dark still. Baba tapped Mani, Meru, and me on the head and walked hand in hand with Mera. We walked for 15 minutes, and as it started raining again, we got into the car, which Padre was driving, and went to our first stop at Chas. It was pouring down then, and the dock bungalow keeper was not there. So we drove off to the Supa rest house, which was supposed to have been our second halt. Adi Jr., Baba's brother, brought the Mondali in two trips in his car. The Mondali stayed in the garage. The weather was mild, and we women in the bungalow. Adi Jr. and Padre, after half an hour, went away with their cars, and then we felt our real life had started. Only those who were to be with Baba in his new life were left. So back a dozen years, Mandla, 1938, Teddy Martens, the picture. Yeah, a color picture of the four women Mandali, courtesy of Charmian Deuce Knowles, Merazad, 1948. Baba and Consort at Panchgani, 1938, one of Mani's pictures. Chapter 89, Traveling Cinema. Supa was a quiet place with a temple near the dock bungalow. Goher's diary for 16 October 1949 notes, at 9 a.m., we all had a cup of tea and a slice of bread and butter. At 3 p.m., we had vegetables and curry. It was nice to see Baba relax. Most of the time he spent with the Mondali and working with them. The surrounding view at Supa was beautiful. The women ventured outside to see the temple the next morning, but they could not go far because of the men being on the other side of the bungalow. When Kaka had brought the men companions their tea on the 16th, Baba had remarked, "The start of the new life is excellent, and I am very happy." He had also reiterated the main points about the new life. From now on, everything must be clear, open, and truthful. Nothing should be kept secret and hidden. All are equal, and all should treat each other and accommodate each other equally. Everyone should try to be 100% honest and should speak the truth, whatever the circumstances and consequences. The most important point to remember in all circumstances is to remain cheerful and happy. Spells of despondency, annoyance, and disgust will assail you, but you should try not to show it on your face. Anger might come, but you should not express it. That's from Lord Mayor Online, page 2785. Baba then assigned duties to each, such as preparing food, washing utensils, washing and cutting the vegetables, and drawing and carrying water from a well several hundred yards away. But he also liberally distributed chocolates and dried fruit. And many felt that they were back in the good old days of Manzil Amim, with God living as man among them. Goher's diary continues. Baba slept well on the night of the 16th. He said he had not slept so well for so long. Now, he had not to think of so many material details. He was free. And the sidebar says Mera and Meru had unrolled his bedding on top of the table. Baba had in fact slept on a dining table in the dock bungalow, but during the night someone had knocked on the door. The noise startled him and he tumbled off. Fortunately, he was not hurt as he fell on his palms, and Baba did sleep soundly for the rest of the night. The sidebar says the women were in a separate room of the dock bungalow where one or two of them slept on the bed with the others on the floor. Goher recorded in her diary for 17 October, we were still at Supa. We all bathed and were ready to leave on our journey on the 18th. We had tea twice and one meal, which Kaka had prepared. There was no rice. Baba told them, we have to start in the morning as early as possible. So the next morning they woke early, washed their faces with cold water, and prepared to leave. Everything had to be done quickly. Roll up there and Baba's beddings, wash, pack, and so on. It was still dark and there was no electricity, but there were hurricane lanterns. Baba had tea with them in their room. It was a large room with a small table. The kettle and sugar were placed on teapoys. Each had an aluminum cup, part of the trunk full of crockery that Elizabeth had brought from the West. We had never used them in the ashram when Elizabeth brought them, Mehera observed. But they came in handy in the new life. Most of what she brought, though, was given away. The cups had no matching saucers, so Mehera used a green plastic saucer that was like a large bowl. It got a crack in it and the tea dripped, but I didn't throw it out, as Baba had drunk a mouthful from it. I kept it. Baba always drank from something other than the cup. It was too hot in the cup, and he wanted the tea to cool quickly so that he could drink it. Goher's diary entry states, we got up at 2 a.m., packed our few belongings, had a cup of tea, and left Supa for Sirur, a distance of 16 miles walking. We started at 4:10 a.m. The roads were muddy and wet due to the rains throughout the night. But when we started, the sky was clear and starry, with the moon reflecting a little light. Baba's shoes were not comfortable, so he wore chappals. But even with all the inconvenience, he still kept up speed. Baba again started out by walking in front with the women, leading the way from the house and out of the gate. Once they had left the vicinity of the bungalow, however, The men companions were told to walk ahead while Kaka, Pendu, and Nilu drove the luggage truck to their next stop. Because Baba did not want the women to walk alone in the dark, he stayed behind with them for quite some time. The men were not allowed to turn around except when Baba wanted to tell them something. Goher was to blow a whistle that she carried, and supposedly the men would stop while Baba caught up with them. Adi Sr. sang Qawwali songs as they walked. It was still cloudy and cool from the rain the night before that had cleansed the air and settled the ever-present dust. Meru remembered how beautifully the moon glowed and how wonderful it felt in the cool, balmy air to be walking with the Avatar. There was a sense of adventure and freedom of just being with Baba. The sky was overcast and the road slippery, but Baba remarked, "Rain or no rain, this time we have to continue the march on foot, regardless of the risks." When the sun rose, Baba told Goher to toot her whistle, but nothing came out. She ran ahead to catch up to the men and kept trying to blow the whistle, but its tiny ball was stuck. To free it, she started banging the whistle on the ground. Mehera-Mani and Meru did not know what the problem was and were bemused to see Goher bending over and striking the whistle against the road. What's come over Goher? They asked each other. She must be angry with the whistle for not sounding, Mani joked. Baba too was amused. Goher, what are you doing? He asked. But he was not happy about the incident. He too had clapped, but the men were too far to hear, talking amongst themselves. Goher and Mani had to shout repeatedly before they stopped. Baba told the men, "This should not happen again. When I want you all to stop walking, you should listen and stop." Meru added that Baba also warned them not to spoil his mood, because then everything would, quote, go in the water, end quote. That means be ruined. It's a Gujarati expression. But we didn't even hear the whistle, the men said. Baba saw that this arrangement would not work, so he began walking with the men. Walk a bit closer, he told the women as he left. If they needed anything, Goher was to use the whistle, which was now unstuck. Occasionally, Baba came back and walked a while with the women. Sidebar says this is from Tales, pages 145-46. Later on, from Benares, Baba again walked in front with the women, while the men followed far behind. Mera had on slacks for walking, while Mani and Meru wore their usual household clothes, a dress with Punjabi pajama pants underneath. Goher also wore this, the first time she had worn such an outfit. They were walking in the new open-toed sandals with straps at the back that Goher had purchased before they left. After a few miles, the sandals began to chafe, and the women started grumbling to Goher. "What kind of shoes did you have made?" "They have to be durable," Goher retorted. "They will soften up after they're broken in." But soon, Goher's feet too started hurting. She took off her sandals and said, I'm not going to walk another step in these. She started to throw them away, but Mara said, No, don't do that. They will come in useful. Don't throw anything away. But I'm getting blisters. I'm not going to wear them. And Goher started walking barefoot down the road. Something will go in your foot, Mara warned. Mara had a pair of spare sandals, and Goher put them on. After some time, Baba's feet also began to hurt, and he too changed into the pair of adjustable Pathon sandals Mara was wearing. She put on the pair Goher had been using. Baba and Ghani both developed blisters, Baba's on his toe and soles, to which Dawn applied band-aids. In spite of the blisters, said Goher, Baba kept on walking. It was very lovely and quiet walking on the road, Mara remembered. The sky was overcast as the sun rose in the east, and a cool breeze blew. It grew hot as the sun rose higher in the sky and the clouds disappeared. We walked 17 miles that day. In the first moments of enthusiasm, we walked quickly, but after that, our pace slackened more and more until Baba turned and gestured, Come on! Usually Baba walked with Erich, said Goher. Every now and again he turned back to see whether we were following. Sometimes he walked with us, Mara by his side, and we followed close together in a group. Originally, Baba had planned to stay the night in Narayangaon, but the ground there was too muddy to stay in the open. Tea had already been paid for, however, so the group stopped for a short while, under a large tree, opened their sacks, and rested. Goher wrote in her diary, By 8 a.m. we had walked 8 miles. We rested near a stream, and the Mandali brought some milk tea with ginger from the village. It was brought free, as we did not carry any money. Previously, rupees 4 had been given to someone. The tea with a touch of fresh ginger was so good that years later, whenever driving to Pune, the women always remembered this spot where they had stopped on the new life journey and enjoyed the refreshing tea. The older members of the group, especially Ghani, Gustaji, and Kaka, each almost 60, were feeling fatigued, and the women too were happy to get off their feet. Baba, 55 at the time, did not appear tired and went off with one of the men. Villagers stopped and asked the women why they were walking when there was a perfectly good bus service on this road. We like walking, they replied. Curious farmwives, surprised that the women spoke Marathi, sat down to chat. Your kind of people always travel in cars, they remarked, puzzled. This sort of thing was to happen frequently during their travels. Sometimes the women companions responded that they were on a pilgrimage, but they had to be careful in what they said, as most people in the area knew of Meher Baba, and they were not to mention his name. Baba returned and asked, "Did you like the tea?" They said that they had, and Mehera recalled. Then Baba said we must start as soon as possible because we must get to our destination before the sun became too hot. We started walking again without stopping. We just walked and walked, even though the sun was quite hot from 10 o'clock onwards. Dr. Ghani got very tired, although at first he walked jauntily with a walking stick. Later, it became useful to push himself forward, and that amused Baba very much. But Baba saw that he reached the destination safe and sound. Baba helped Ghani by taking one end of the walking stick and having Ghani hold the other end. Ghani blindly followed, without thinking of the distance remaining, as Baba led him. Near Sirur, when it looked as if Ghani would drop, Baba told all to halt under a tree, where he waited 15 minutes before giving Ghani a sip of water and sprinkling some of it over his head. Goher entered in her diary, "At 9 a.m., we started walking again. Baba walked ahead with the mandali, and we women a furlong behind. At 11:45 a.m., just a mile from Sirur, Dr. Ghani almost fainted. So Baba rested under a tree with all and asked everyone to drink water after 15 minutes. The men went ahead to see about their accommodations in town, which had been made at a traveler's bungalow, but it was now occupied by some military officers. A merchant from Sirur offered to let them use a vacant building, most recently used as a makeshift movie theater. The Sri Mahadur Touring Cinema, which was opposite a bus stand in a congested area in the heart of the city. The women followed later so as not to be conspicuous by traipsing into town with a group of men, but they still found their path thronged with people looking at them with frank curiosity. And Meru remembered, having lived a secluded life in Baba's ashram, we minded the crowds in Sirur gazing at us very much, so we kept our eyes down. We were all very thankful to come to our destination and to refresh ourselves with a wash and a cool drink of water. Baba and the ladies occupied the stage behind the screen, and the companions settled down in the auditorium. It was a strange place to be resting in. Everyone's muscles felt stiff, and we could hear one another groaning as we sat down or tried to get up. Mayor said, "Theater or no theater, we just wanted to get comfortable, wash our face, feet, and hands. Our thigh muscles got so tight from walking. Even to bend down to get our sacks was painful. And after walking so much, there was no furniture on the stage of the theater. We moved some folding chairs from the auditorium onto the stage and unrolled our beddings there." They reached the theater at noon. Kaka, Pendu, and Nilu had already arrived and prepared lunch. For afternoon tea, Baba, as he had promised earlier, distributed jalabis, those are Indian sweets, to the men. This time, the women were given some sweets too, as Goher noted in her account of the day. This is Goher's diary. After that, we walked again and reached Sirur at 12:30 noon. The dock bungalow was not available, so we rested in the traveling cinema. We women on the stage behind the screen, and the Mandali in the auditorium. Baba's feet were swollen and had blisters on the soles. He could scarcely rest his feet on the ground. We had tears in our eyes to see him walk thus. And Sidebar says, and it's Goher saying this, Mehera put felt pads underneath some soft woolen socks so Baba would be able to walk more comfortably. At night, we persuaded him to allow us to apply Vaseline to his feet. In spite of the huge, severe blisters on the soles of his feet, Baba kept walking. And Goher's diary continues. At 1:15 p.m., we had khichdi and roos, which is rice dal and sauce, which Kaka had cooked, as he had gone ahead in the truck. At 5 p.m., had lunch and jalebi. Since they had not stopped at Narayan Gaon and had reached Sirur a day early, it was decided to spend the next day, 19 October, there also. Happy to have a chance to rest, everyone was in bed early, before 9 o'clock, moaning from their aching muscles. Baba was much amused. The women could hear the men on the other side of the screen, and Mani remembered. A light was on, and I was throwing shadows on the screen with my fingers, making rabbits and so on. Baba was with the men, hidden from our view, but we could hear Erich's voice as he was interpreting what Baba was telling them. One of the things we heard Baba tell them was, you have to be lords and masters of your faces during the new life, no matter what happens, which meant never letting one's face betray any unhappy emotion one might feel. But simply masking your face was not much of a solution either, because Baba would draw out the tiniest waver of emotion that might rise within you. He would detect it and bring it out. Cheerful did not mean you had to go about smiling. If you did that at the wrong time, it was just as bad. We had to learn to develop that sensitivity to Baba's pleasure at all times. It is not something that one can give a label to or cut up in squares like toffee. It is something very subtle, like flowing water, and you have to learn the feel of it and to hold it in your hand without letting it run through your fingers. And blessed are you if you can do it. Mani noted that, quote, being cheerful meant we had not to complain. We had not to be sad or look glum. The impact was hardest on the men. We had to do it too, but the brunt was more on the men, end quote. Erich observed that keeping one's mood in the new life was what Baba meant when he said, "Don't worry, be happy." "We tried our very best to do it," Erich said, but then added, "We did have moods, but Baba made us forget all about them. Just a little twinkle in his eyes, or a smile, or some humor drowned the whole of our nasty moods." The next morning after breakfast, Baba again emphasized the conditions and principles of the new life to the men companions, saying that he was helping them now, but after 1 January, there would be no question of any help or care. Life during that period will be lived at the mercy of the world. It will be a life of complete hopelessness and helplessness. With their tea that afternoon, the men companions had more sweets, ladus this time, to celebrate Baba's escape from injury when he fell off the table. Discussing their walk from Supa, Baba teased them. The women completed the 16 miles with ease. In fact, they were complaining that they were handicapped by being unable to increase their pace because you were so slow. The last entry in Goher's diary notes only 19th October 1949. We are at Sirur, living at the cinema. Feel rested after 17-mile walk yesterday. That evening, the women had a meal of rice and dal with Baba that had been ordered from a restaurant. Baba said they must get up at 4 a.m. the next morning to take a bus to their next stop. He wanted to get away while it was still dark and the townspeople were not up and about. But that night was the Diwali Festival of Lights. Soon a firecracker went off, then another, and another. As the night wore on, it got worse. More and more firecrackers were lit. Baba was trying to rest in a far corner of the stage, but at 11 p.m. he called Goher and asked, "What is all this noise? I want to rest and I can't. Go and tell the companions." Goher could not reach the men companions from behind the stage, as the screen blocked that side, so she had to walk around the hall to them. When she told them, some of them went to the owner's house. But the man said that he was helpless to prevent people from lighting firecrackers on Diwali. No one knew what to do. They were so tired and wanted to rest, but could not. Baba lay down again, but he was not pleased. Mehera remembered, "We thought it would stop by 11, but it didn't." Then towards 12, Baba clapped his hands and said, "What is this? I can't rest. This is very disturbing." The Mandali went out to try to stop it, but whom to tell? There were so many houses and you couldn't stop them from lighting fireworks because it was Diwali and it is traditional to celebrate it. So Baba said, "Now get up and all pack." We had to get up and pack our bedding and bags. No cup of tea or anything. No one had slept. Baba told us to board the bus that had been hired and was waiting outside. We thought, now it is the middle of the night, so we'll quietly steal into the bus and be seated. and nobody will be there to trouble Baba to give darshan or to disturb him. But somehow, word got around of our departure, and people thronged through the lane to see Baba. When Baba was told the crowd would not disperse, he said it was all right to let them stay as long as no one bowed down to him or tried to take his darshan. Quietly and solemnly, the people stood as Baba and the rest of us walked down the narrow aisle they made leading to the bus. Although no one bowed to Baba, Mehera recalled, we felt so awkward as people bowed to us. The men companions had already packed the large state transport bus and tied a sheet as a screen between the men in the back seats and the women in the front few rows with Baba. Mehera continued. The wooden seats were straight and very narrow, not permitting us to sit comfortably or lean back. But what with fatigue from the previous journey and lack of sleep, we found ourselves nodding and swaying with the motion of the bus. Goher, I remember, was seated behind the driver and had a full view of the back of his cap. In the semi-darkness, he looked like a very tempting round cushion, and Baba half-jokingly wanted her not to fall forward, or she might find herself resting on this enticing pillow. The bus rattled noisily, but Mani, too, was dozing. Dreadful roads, so the bus sounded like 100 tin skeletons rattling, Mani later wrote in her diary. Mehera stayed awake, looking at Baba to see what he was doing, and thought, it is good we are going to Pune by bus, as walking on the road, someone might have known Baba and disturbed him. When they approached Pune 2 hours later, Baba wished to have tea outside the city to avoid being recognized, and the companions were told to find a suitable restaurant. We were so happy to hear this, Mehera said, as they had left in the middle of the night without drinking tea. Baba made us appreciate everything so much. They drove through the city and stopped at an Irani cafe on the other side of town towards Satara. Baba had tied his scarf so that his braid could not be seen, and he got down to take 2 teacups from the men companions and bring them to Mehera and one of the others. Goher brought 2 more, and they had tea, bread, and butter in the bus. Are you comfortable? Baba asked. Did you sleep well? Everything tasted so nice, Mehera recalled. Their journey continued, and the bus did not stop again until they reached Belgaum that afternoon, where Vishnu had arranged their stay in a rural suburb called Thalakwadi. It took them an hour to find the place. It was already growing dark. And here, too, it was raining heavily, and the road leading to the farm had become muddy. Moreover, a hut with a tile roof and tata walls, that was to have been constructed for the men companions, was not yet ready. The cement in the new flooring was still wet, and dirt and slush were everywhere. In the pouring rain, it was difficult to unload the truck, so only essential articles were taken out, and the rest left to be unloaded the next day. These discomforts are the first step towards Satyanashi, meaning total ruination, Baba told the men, which we have to pass through. And the sidebar says, Erich defined Satyanashi, a word originated by Baba, as, quote, total annihilation of everything ephemeral, accepting at each step what came in one's way. And that's quoted from Naushirwan Anzar, the editor of The Best of the Glow, Myrtle Beach, Shariar Press, 1984, page 185. The next day he remarked, that's Baba remarked, if the training period turns out to be successful, our life of hopelessness will be the envy of the gods. And that quotes from the book Tales, pages 148, 49. Picture of Baba and Mehera. Baba playing the Dolak at Mahabaleshwar, 25 December 1950. The previous picture was Panchgani, 1938. Chapter 90, Women's Work. When Meher Baba and the women companions got off the bus in Balgaum on 20 October 1949, they were faced with the dilemma of how to reach their quarters. During the monsoon, it is very cold and windy in Balgaum, Mehera related, because it rains very hard there. When we arrived, it was raining steadily, and our house was located out in a field that had been plowed recently. To reach it, we had to walk through thick slush. Fortunately, Goher had brought two pair of waterproof gumboots that Narina and Elizabeth had not taken with them when they returned to America. The rain in Merazad had reminded Goher of them, so she had stuffed them in a gunny sack and brought them along. She told Baba that she had them, and he said for the women to put them on and walk in turns through the saturated field. The women's house was 200 yards from the men's hut, a more substantial structure, but very plain. Behind tata, meaning bamboo matting, that had been erected for privacy, they found an ordinary, quote unquote, Hindu type brick structure with three narrow rooms and a tiled roof, but no indoor ceiling or veranda. The rooms were completely vacant, but the women made themselves as comfortable as they could. As long as there was a roof over our heads, Mehera commented, we were happy. And the sidebar says, the 22-acre Belgaum property was acquired in the name of Vishnu's cousin, but the 4 acres of land on which the structures and a well were located was put in Mehera's name. After her death, it was to go to the arrangement wallahs, who would be, quote, expected to preserve the land by way of a memory or monument of our stay here at the beginning of the new life. And that's from Lord Mayor Online, page 2807. Later, in June 1955, this land too was sold to Vishnu's cousin. Baba stayed in the recently built Tata hut away from the house. Although its cement floor was not quite dry, Baba slept there. Being monsoon season and having rained all night, the weather was chilly. Wooden planks were sent for the next day, over which Mera and Meru spread Baba's thin bedding so he wouldn't catch a chill, and put a curtain around the mosquito net. Meru and Goher slept in the front room of their house, Mera and Mani in the second room, and their and Baba's trunks were placed in the third room, where they also ate. They spread out their bedding on the bare concrete floor, through which rainwater had seeped. It wasn't at all warm, Meru remembered, and it was damp underfoot. Goher's corner, particularly, was always damp, so she was never comfortable while they were there. We had very limited luggage, as Baba had allowed us only a certain amount of clothing and bedding, which was very meager in the circumstances, especially when you had to lie on a damp floor. Almost every time it rained, the main room became flooded, and then the Mondali would come along with ladders and try to patch up the leaks. Also, every night, the mice were busy gnawing away at the walls, and in the morning, before Baba came for tea, we would sweep up the rubble. One night, Mani woke up startled, asking what it was that had bitten her on the finger. Mara was nearby, and Goher and I were in the other room. All of us woke up and learned that a mouse had bitten her finger. Her hand must have been sticking out of the mosquito curtain, and the mouse had nibbled on it. It was bleeding a bit, and Goher attended to it. That anecdote is from the Tales as well, page 149, 151. When Mani had first awakened, she thought that Mara had poked her pillow, and she shouted, "Mara, what are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Mara replied. "I'm not doing anything." Besides mice and rats, Belgaum had hordes of mosquitoes, but it was not all bad, Mara recalled. Belgaum was nice and cool, like Pune. Everything flourished there. Good soil, many mangoes. At the back, it was open fields and quiet. The 20-day training period that Baba and the companions spent in Balgaum was occupied with household chores. On 22 October, Baba assigned such duties as cleaning vessels, carrying water to both houses from the well, sweeping the area clean, and so on. Washing of clothes and utensils was done outside. Since there was no proper kitchen, meals were brought from a restaurant until they were settled. For the men companions, the first 3 days were to be just a trial, with duties finalized on 25 October, the day on which the training period would officially begin. On their first day of menial labor, however, Baba again distributed sweets to the men to celebrate the inauguration of their stay in Belgaum. Since Baba was now their companion, he too participated in what the men thought were tedious chores. He helped them in the kitchen, even cleaning pots, and once the women saw him drawing water from the deep well near their house. Another time, the editor of a local newspaper insisted on seeing Baba in person. Baba was sweeping the hut at the time. Keeping the broom on the floor, Baba came forward and touched the man's feet. Baba gave a helping hand to all, even carrying things on his head back and forth between the men's and women's side. When he carried a basket of vegetables on his head, Mara saw him coming and called to the others excitedly, "Look at Baba." The women too were doing their own household work, which led Baba to praise them to the men. These four women, by working cooperatively like menials in doing work they have never done before, are faithfully living the new life. Even Mera is working like a servant, sweeping floors, washing, dusting, doing things I have never before permitted her to do. In referring to the mosquitoes that plagued everyone, Baba also commented, "Mani has a rash all over her face and body that looks like measles." But in spite of the damp rooms and mosquitoes, I was pleased to see the women in buoyant spirits, laughing and joking. They are busy building mud stoves, and from the 1st of November, they will start cooking. Previously, before the new life, Baba's food had always been prepared separately. Now, food for everyone, the men, the women, and Baba, was cooked in the same pot. A temporary kitchen of Tata had been erected for the women. However, it was small, difficult to cook in, and without an outlet for the smoke from the wood fire to escape. Moreover, when when they took over the duty of preparing food for all, they were not accustomed to cooking on such a large scale. It took several days before they got the portions correct. For instance, the first day they failed to prepare enough tomato chutney. Baba thought there was not enough tomatoes and blamed Vishnu, who did the marketing. But entering the companion's hut that morning, he explained, "I had the impression that the shortage of the tomato side dish was due to an insufficient quantity of tomatoes. But I have since found that there were enough tomatoes in stock, and this being the first day of cooking by the women, who are not used to preparing meals in bulk, the proportion could not be adjusted." Mara outlined the schedule for the day. In the morning, Adi sang Baba's songs and the arti. After tea, Baba went to the mandali. We felt cold with not much to do. We were up by 5, trying to get warm in our rooms. Then to the kitchen, cooking. We started cooking by 7 a.m. Besides rice and dal, they cooked one vegetable in the morning. Baba came to the kitchen as usual to ask whether the food was ready. The vegetable would be, but the rice was still cooking. One day he said, "Now it is 11:45 and the companions are feeling hungry. The food should be ready by 10:45. So the women started earlier. Baba had told them not to get angry, to talk in soft, sweet voices to each other. This was especially difficult when they were in a rush, and they sometimes spoke abruptly to one another. Mani said, "In the new life, it was a little difficult during that time when we were not supposed to get excited, not supposed to say anything or talk back." There was a situation that came up one day between Mara and myself. Before anything could happen, Baba turned around and said, "Don't get excited. Mara and you have a far back connection from previous lives, a connection from way back." Meru said, "We were always united and usually very loving towards each other. It was the new life, and we had promised Baba. So if by mistake things started to go badly, we would remind each other." Mara added, "We had to always remember to be sweet to each other. We would feel impatient and in a hurry to do the work, so it was difficult not to get angry. But Baba had said, one must not talk angrily or tersely or get impatient. We had to try to be sweet when we did not feel like being sweet at all. We had to do all the cooking for the Mondali and our own laundry as well. Baba would come to the kitchen to see about the food, stir the dal, and ask, "Will it be ready in half an hour?" Again, he would go back to the Mandali for half an hour. Baba was always active, back and forth. And we'll stop here at the end of page 435.